Ever wonder about Andrew Carnegie? You know, the guy who said, the man who dies thus rich dies disgraced, but then made one of the biggest fortunes ever. How does it even work? He gave almost all of it away in the end. Today, we're really digging into his story, using a detailed biography to pull out, well, the surprising bits, the key moments. We want to give you, our listener, the full picture of this really complex figure. Steel, libraries, philanthropy, but there's so much more underneath.
Exactly. And it's not just a story about getting rich. It's, it's about America changing in the 19th century, industry, ideas about society, even how modern giving got started. We're hoping for some real aha moments for you, uncovering the forces, sometimes clashing forces, that made Carnegie and America.
Okay, let's get into it. So Carnegie didn't start rich. Far from it. He was born in 1835 in Scotland, Dunfermline, in a tiny one-room cottage. His dad was a weaver.
Right, and the weaving trade was collapsing. Mechanization, tough times. Starvation was a real threat.
So his mom had to step up. She became the main earner, selling potted meats. Can you imagine? Talk about pressure from day one.
But even with all that struggle, there were these early influences, really interesting ones. His uncle on his mother's side, George Lauder Sr., he introduced young Andrew to Robert Burns, the poet, and stories of Scottish heroes like Wallace and Robert the Bruce.
So it wasn't just about surviving. There was this spark of, learning.
Yeah.
History and literature.
Exactly. It fostered this love for books, for ideas, which, seems almost counterintuitive for a future industrial giant, but it was there.
And things got so bad they had to leave Scotland. They borrowed money from that same uncle, Lauder Sr., sailed to America in 1848. Carnegie was only 12, landed in Allegheny, Pennsylvania. And his first job, wow, a bobbin boy, Pittsburgh cotton mill.
12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
For $1.20 a week. Just imagine that kind of hardship. It must have left a mark, right, on his views later.
Oh, absolutely. You can definitely draw a line from that experience to, well, both his incredible drive and his later ideas about giving back. He moved on quick, though. Fired boilers in another factory said that was even more irksome, if you can believe it.
Yeah. More irksome than 12-hour days as a bobbin boy.
But then, the key move. At 14, he becomes a telegraph messenger boy. $2.50 a week.
And this is where he starts to shine.
Totally. He was super diligent, memorized all the businesses in Pittsburgh, the important faces, made connections, and get this, he taught himself to understand the telegraph clicks by ear, didn't even need the paper tape. That's skill.
Incredible. A driven kid, no doubt. But what was the real fuel beyond just, escaping poverty?
Well, this is crucial. Colonel James Anderson, he had a personal library, about 400 books, and he opened it up to working boys on Saturday nights. Carnegie just devoured those books.
The library connection. That makes sense.
It was huge for him. He was so grateful. And it led to this pledge he made to himself. He basically said, if I ever get rich,
I'll make sure other poor boys get the same chance. Something like that.
Exactly. He resolved, if ever wealth came to me, that other poor boys might receive opportunities similar to those for which we were indebted to the nobleman. So right there, early on, you see the seed of his massive library philanthropy later. It wasn't an afterthought. It came from this deep gratitude.
Okay, so that drive, that gratitude, then comes the railroads. Big leap. 1853, he's 18, starts working for Thomas A. Scott at the Pennsylvania Railroad.
A huge turning point. Scott was a major figure.
And Carnegie just climbs the ladder. Superintendent of the Western Division by 24, making $1,500 a year, which was serious money then. And a little side note, he hired his cousin, Maria Hogan. Apparently, she became the first female telegraph operator in the country.
Which is pretty neat, but think bigger picture. The railroads were big business back then, the first giant corporations, really. So Carnegie learns management, cost control, everything, right from Scott, a master.
And Scott helps him invest too, right?
Oh, yeah. Scott guided his first investments, like $500 in Adams Express. His mom had to mortgage their house for it, the whole $700 house.
Wow. Talk about betting on your kid.
And then shares in a sleeping car company. This is how he started building capital. And honestly, a lot of it was based on connections, maybe even what we'd now call inside information.
Right. The rules were different.
Very different.
Then the Civil War breaks out. Scott gets a big government job, and he brings Carnegie along. Superintendent of the military railways, Union telegraph lines for the East. Important stuff.
Super important. He helped reopen rail lines into Washington, D.C. after the Confederates cut them. Rode the engine of the first train carrying Union troops back into the Capitol.
And he got that scar, right? From freeing a trapped telegraph wire under fire.
Yeah.
He joked he was the first casualty.
He did. But beyond the anecdotes, the war really drove home a point for him and for the country.
Which was?
How absolutely vital industry was. Railroads, iron, manufacturing. You couldn't win without it. That lesson stuck with him.
Makes sense. So after the war, he leaves the railroads.
Yep. Decides to focus on ironworks, founds Keystone Bridge Works, then Union Iron Works. Smart move. Building bridges. Iron bridges were replacing wood.
And he keeps using those railroad connections.
Constantly. Scott, J. Edgar Thompson at the Pennsy, they gave him contracts. He gave them stock. The Pennsylvania Railroad was his best customer. It was all interconnected.
So this leads him straight into steel, the Steel King phase. What were the big moves there, say, 1875 to 1900?
Okay, two huge things. First, technology. He jumps on the Bessemer process.
That's the thing that made steel cheap and fast to produce.
Exactly. Blasting air through molten iron revolutionized everything. Steel prices plummeted. Second, his business strategy. Vertical integration.
Meaning he owned everything.
Pretty much. From the ground up. Iron ore mines, coal fields, the coke ovens needed to process the coal, the ships and railroads to move it all, and finally, the steel mills themselves. Total control.
Ruthless efficiency. Cut costs like crazy.
He did. And buying Homestead Steelworks in 1883 was a major step. By 1889, Carnegie Steel was the biggest producer in the world. Pig iron, steel rails, coke. Massive.
He was clearly brilliant strategically.
Yeah.
But not always playing nice were his methods.
No, definitely not. The sources mention, manipulating the market with railroads to get better shipping prices.
And lobbying. Pushing for tariff.
Oh, yeah. He lobbied hard for trade tariffs that protected American steel from foreign competition, made him millions, and apparently he tried to keep that lobbying part quiet.
Right. So building this empire, it came with some sharp elbows and some real controversy, which we need to talk about.
Absolutely. His image wasn't spotless, not by a long shot.
Let's start with the Johnstown flood in 1889. Terrible disaster. Carnegie was involved. How?
He was a member, one of over 50 wealthy guys, in something called the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. Posh retreat.
Okay, so what did the club have to do with the flood?
Well, the club owned the dam that broke, the South Fork Dam. It was an old earthen dam, part of a defunct canal system. And the club had made changes, repairs that were, let's just say, less than well-engineered. Crucially, they removed discharge pipes that would have let excess water out safely.
Oh, wow. So when the heavy rains came.
Catastrophe. May 31st, 1889. The dam failed. 20 million tons of water just roared down the valley, killed over 2,200 people, wiped Johnstown off the map.
And the club members, what did they do besides being members of this club that owned the faulty dam?
It's revealing. They quickly formed a relief committee for the victims in Pittsburgh. Which sounds good, but they also made a pact among themselves, agreed never to speak publicly about the club or the flood. And legally, they managed to avoid any responsibility. No lawsuits stuck.
Carnegie did later give money for a new library in Johnstown to replace the one destroyed.
He did. A gesture, perhaps. But the whole episode raises serious questions about accountability, doesn't it? For the wealthy and powerful.
It really does. And then, just a few years later, 1892, you get the Homestead Strike.
Another dark chapter, a really violent labor dispute, lasted 143 days.
And Carnegie's role, he wasn't even there, was he?
Conveniently, no. He'd gone off to Scotland, left Henry Clay Frick in charge, and Frick was notoriously anti-union, hardline.
So what sparked it?
The union, the Amalgamated Association, asked for a wage increase. Frick countered with a massive wage decrease, 22% for almost half the workers involved, and then he locked them out.
And brought in strikebreakers.
And Pinkertons, 300 Pinkerton agents, basically a private army.
Which led to
violence.
A full-on battle. Strikers fought the Pinkertons as they tried to land from barges on the river. People were killed, 10 men died, 7 strikers, 3 Pinkertons, hundreds injured, awful stuff.
And that anarchist Berkman tried to kill Frick?
Yeah, Alexander Berkman. He wasn't even a steel worker, but he saw Frick as the enemy, shot and stabbed him. Frick survived, unbelievably. But Berkman thought killing Frick would somehow put the blame back onto Carnegie. Did it? How did Homestead affect Carnegie's reputation?
It damaged it. Permanently. Even though he wasn't physically present, everyone knew Frick was his guy, implementing his company's policies. It really stained his image as this benevolent figure.
Right. So fast forward a bit. 1901, Carnegie's 65. He decides to retire.
And does it in the biggest way possible. Sells Carnegie Steel to J.P. Morgan.
For how much again? It was staggering.
The total deal was over $300 million. Carnegie's personal share was about $225 million, paid in 50-year gold bonds.
Unbelievable wealth.
Yeah.
This sale created U.S. Steel, right? First billion-dollar company ever.
That's the one.
But okay, he sells the company. He's arguably the richest man in the world or close to it. What does he do now? This is where the story really shifts, isn't it?
Completely. This is where the gospel of wealth becomes reality.
That was his article from 1889.
Yeah, where he laid out his philosophy, that the rich have a duty, basically, to use their fortunes for the public good during their lifetimes.
Where he said that famous line, "The man who dies thus rich dies disgraced." Pretty blunt.
Incredibly blunt for the time. His whole life philosophy, he said, was kind of in thirds.
Thirds?
Yeah. First third, get all the education you can. Second third, make all the money you can. Final third, give it all away.
Give it all away.
That was the goal, a radical idea. It challenged everything about inherited wealth and what rich people were supposed to do.
And he certainly tried. The scale of his giving is just immense. Libraries are the obvious one.
The most famous, for sure. Around 3,000 public libraries. U.S., Britain, Canada, elsewhere.
And his system was smart, wasn't it? He didn't just dump buildings on towns.
No, that's key. He'd provide the money for the building and the books if the local town provided the land and promised to fund its operation and maintenance.
So the community had to be invested too. He was sure they'd last.
Exactly. It fostered local responsibility, made them genuine public institutions.
But it wasn't just libraries. What else?
Oh, so much. Education was huge. He founded the Carnegie Institute of Technology, now Carnegie Mellon University.
Oh, in Pittsburgh.
And the Carnegie Institution in Washington, D.C. for scientific research. Funded telescopes, like the big Hooker telescope at Mount Wilson.
Scotland too, right? Helping students there.
Yep, $10 million for the Carnegie Trust for the Universities of Scotland for research and to help deserving kids afford university, going back to his roots.
And music. I mean, Carnegie Hall.
Built Carnegie Hall in New York, absolutely iconic, supported the National Conservatory of Music, and funded, get this, 7,000 pipe organs for churches and temples, any denomination.
7,000? Wow. What about pensions?
Yes, fascinating area. He set up pension funds for his old workers at Homestead, but maybe even more significantly for American college professors. That fund eventually grew into TIACRF.
Really, the huge retirement fund company. That started with Carnegie.
It evolved from his initial endowment. There was a catch, though. Schools linked to churches had to cut those ties to get the pension funds.
Interesting. He also set up the Hero Fund, right, for acts of bravery.
The Carnegie Hero Fund, yes.
Yeah.
Recognizing civilian heroism.
Okay, but one of the most maybe surprising areas was world peace. How does a steel tycoon become a peace activist?
It is surprising, isn't it? But he became deeply opposed to imperialism, especially the U.S. taking over the Philippines after the Spanish-American War.
He spoke out against it.
Vigorously. He joined the Anti-Imperialist League with people like Mark Twain. He even offered the Philippines $20 million personally so they could buy their independence from the U.S.
He offered them $20 million. Seriously.
Seriously. The offer wasn't accepted, obviously, but it shows how strongly he felt.
And he funded peace institutions.
Big time. Gave $1.5 million to build the Peace Palace in The Hague, home of the International Court of Justice, and in 1910 established the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace with $10 million. He genuinely believed war was on its way out.
He predicted the end of war was as certain as day follows night.
He did, which makes the timing tragically ironic, because just a few years later, 1914...
World War I breaks out, right after he'd founded the Church Peace Union, which is now the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs.
A bitter irony for his later years. All that hope for peace dashed.
So when you look at his own writings, his philosophy, how did he square all this? The ruthless business, the philanthropy, the contradictions.
He definitely wrestled with it. He wrote things like, "The amassing of wealth is one of the worst species of idolatry," said money worship was debasing.
He thought money should be a tool, a useful drudge.
Yeah, a means to higher things. Enlightenment and the joys of the mind, as he put it. The goal wasn't the money itself, but what you could do with it for society.
But then there's the whole Herbert Spencer thing, his intellectual hero.
Right, the social Darwinist philosopher. Carnegie called Spencer his teacher, loved his ideas about evolution, progress. His motto was, "All is well since all grows better."
But Spencer's ideas seem kind of opposed to some of Carnegie's actions.
Massively. Spencer was against government interference like tariffs, which Carnegie loved. Spencer feared big monopolies, called crushing competitors commercial murder.
And Spencer supposedly visited Carnegie's mills and said something brutal.
The story goes, he said, 6 months residence here would justify suicide. Not exactly an endorsement.
And Spencer thought helping the poor was bad for evolution, right? Interfering with natural selection.
Pretty much. He saw it as an imprudent disservice.
But Carnegie clearly didn't follow that part. His whole philanthropy was about helping people improve themselves. Libraries, education.
Exactly. That's a huge divergence. Carnegie took the survival of the fittest idea maybe in business, but believed that once you'd survived and thrived, you had a duty to provide the tools, the charity for others to climb up to. It's a fascinating contradiction or maybe adaptation of Spencer's ideas.
It really highlights that tension, doesn't it? The self-made man versus the structures that allow that success and the responsibility that comes with it.
Perfectly put. And related to that was his really strong stance against inherited wealth.
He didn't want rich kids just getting fortunes.
Hated the idea, thought it was wasteful, killed ambition, believed future leaders would come from the ranks of the poor like he did, let them earn it themselves.
What about his own faith? Was he religious?
Raised Presbyterian, but he was pretty skeptical early on, especially of Calvinism. Liked more scientific explanations. Apparently his views softened a bit later in life. He kept some connections to churches, funded those organs, but clearly his gospel of wealth was his main creed.
So he dies in 1919, August 11th. He's 83.
And he'd managed to give away a staggering amount by then. Over $350 million.
Which was almost all of it.
Pretty much. The last $30 million or so went to his foundations and charities in his will. He really tried to live up to that die disgraced line.
And the legacy today is, well, it's everywhere. Carnegie Mellon University, obviously. The Carnegie Libraries still stand. Even a dinosaur named after him.
Autologous Carnegie, yeah. And the Carnegie Medal for Kids books in the UK, towns named Carnegie. He was, at his peak, the second richest American. Only Rockefeller had more.
So how do we sum him up? How do you judge a figure like that? Ruthless industrialist, visionary philanthropist.
It's tough. His biographer, Joseph Wall, had an interesting take. He suggested maybe with the giving away of his money, he would justify what he had done to get that money. A kind of atonement, maybe?
A way to balance the scales.
Perhaps. He definitely embodies a certain version of the American dream, the immigrant who makes it huge. But his story forces you to ask uncomfortable questions about how that dream is achieved and what responsibility comes with it. The good and the bad are all tangled up.
So we've covered a lot of ground, Andrew Carnegie. From that weaver's cottage in Scotland to basically ruling American steel and then giving almost all of it away. It's a story of ambition, innovation, sure, but also deep conflict and this powerful idea about using wealth for society.
So listening to all this, what really jumps out at you is that incredible determination he had from the start, the sheer genius, maybe ruthlessness of his business strategy, or just the mind-boggling scale of his philanthropy.
Carnegie himself said something like, "There is no class so pitiably wretched as that which possesses money and nothing else." Makes you think, doesn't it? Is massive wealth just a tool? And if it is, what's the ultimate goal? And today, with fortunes bigger than ever, what can we learn from a guy who thought making millions was fine, but dying rich was a disgrace? Worth pondering what that really means for us now.